Belton, Missouri, a quiet suburban town just south of Kansas City. Tree-lined streets, football games on Friday nights, a place where people recognize your car before they recognize your face. In 2007, Belton was the kind of town where parents still believed their kids were safe at school. 17-year-old Cara Kopetsky grew up here. She was known as outspoken, funny, and fiercely honest. Friends described her as a firecracker. If you wanted the truth, even when it stung, Cara was the one you asked. She was also in many ways a typical teenager. She experimented constantly with her appearance. New hair colors, new makeup styles, new looks every few weeks. Her bedroom door was almost always closed, music playing, phone pressed to her ear for hours at a time. Her mother once joked that Cara's phone bill was over 40 pages long. Cara forgot her house keys so often that climbing in and out of her bedroom window became a running family joke. But in the spring of 2007, something had changed. Those closest to her noticed that she seemed quieter, less confident, less like herself. The spark people had always known was dimming. On May 4, 2007, Cara went to school like any other day. She had a free period just after 9 a.m. Surveillance cameras at Belton High School show her leaving the building at 9:19 a.m. She walked out alone, calm, unhurried. Nothing about her body language suggested fear or distress. She never came back. When Cara failed to return to class, missed her shift at Popeyes later that day, and stopped responding to calls, concern quickly turned into panic. Just after 5 p.m., her family contacted police. Inside Cara's room, nearly everything she would have taken if she planned to leave town was still there. Her clothes, her makeup, her iPod, her cigarettes, her hair straightener. The one thing missing was her phone, a pink Motorola Razr she practically lived on. Phone records later showed it had not been used since that morning. Police checked her locker at school. Her debit card was inside. There had been no activity on her bank account, no withdrawals, no purchases, no signs of planning. Cara had upcoming plans. She was supposed to see friends, pick up her paycheck, attend a job interview at Quick Trip. She never showed up. She never called. Belton mobilized. Her face was printed on flyers and taped to streetlights, gas station windows, storefronts. Hundreds of people searched fields, ditches, wooded areas. Her MySpace page filled with comments begging her to come home. Police received over 400 tips and more than 100 reported sightings. She was allegedly seen in Florida, California, on an airplane, even at Disney World. None of it was real. One detail would soon take on chilling importance. Just days before her disappearance, Cara had taken the extraordinary step of going to police. She reported that her ex-boyfriend had kidnapped her. Cara had been dating Killer Yust for approximately 9 months. At first, the relationship seemed exciting. He was older, a musician, the lead singer in a band, charismatic, popular, the kind of guy people described as intense and magnetic. But intensity has a darker side. Over time, Cara's parents noticed she was withdrawing from friends and family. Her personality began to change. The independence that defined her was slowly being replaced by anxiety and fear. On April 24, 2007, Cara posted a message online that would later read like a warning. She wrote that she had dedicated the last 9 months of her life to Killer, that she had neglected her friends and family, that she had forgotten who she was, and that she was trying to find herself again. 4 days later, things escalated. Cara reported to police that Killer had forced her into his car as she was leaving work and held her against her will before letting her out miles away. She obtained an order of protection on May 1st. In the protective order, Cara described being restrained and choked. She wrote that the abuse had escalated and that she was afraid of what he might do next. 3 days later, she vanished. Police interviewed Killer early in the investigation. He claimed he had received a missed call from Cara around 11 a.m. on May 4th, but said he was at his grandfather's house and later at band practice. He insisted he had not seen her, but phone records told a different story. Cara called Killer at 9:13 a.m. Killer called her back at 9:20 a.m. That return call happened just 1 minute after she was last seen leaving school. It was a discrepancy investigators could not ignore. Killer admitted to police that he had previously forced Cara into his car. He admitted to grabbing her during arguments, but when it came to her disappearance, he remained vague, detached, at times strangely philosophical. As weeks turned into months, then years, the case went cold. But Killer did not disappear. He remained on law enforcement's radar, repeatedly arrested for drug offenses, traffic violations, and assault. He struggled with substance abuse from a young age. He had a diagnosis of bipolar disorder and PTSD. He spoke openly about violence, jealousy, and control. Multiple people would later come forward claiming Keller had confessed to killing Cara, an ex-girlfriend, a bandmate, a jailhouse acquaintance, even his own girlfriend, who police asked to wear a wire. On a secretly recorded FBI tape, Keller spoke cryptically about spirits, energy, and feeling Cara touch him. At one point he said words that still haunt investigators. "I killed her." Still, there was no body, no physical evidence, no crime scene, and without those, there were no charges, until another girl disappeared. September 8, 2016. Nearly 10 years had passed since Cara Kopetsky walked out of her high school and vanished. Life in the Kansas City area had moved on. New families, new routines, new names in the headlines. But the past had not stayed buried. 21-year-old Jessica Runions was living her life carefully and deliberately. She worked as a pastry chef at a senior living community and had recently been promoted to manager. She was proud of her job, proud of her independence, proud that she could support herself while planning her future. Jessica was close with her family, especially her two younger sisters. Her parents described her as responsible, thoughtful, and protective. She checked in constantly. Family group chats were filled with messages, photos, and updates throughout the day. Jessica was not the type to disappear without a word. On the night of September 8th, she went to a party in Kansas City with friends. Nothing about the evening seemed unusual, but when she did not return home and her phone began going straight to voicemail, alarm bells went off almost immediately. Only a few hours later, police made a disturbing discovery. Jessica's car was found burned in a wooded area, far from homes or businesses. The fire had been intense enough to destroy most of the vehicle, but Jessica was nowhere to be found. It was clear very quickly that this was not an accident. Investigators began retracing Jessica's last known movements. Witnesses from the party described seeing her leave with a familiar face. Kyler Yost. At that point, Yost was 28 years old. He had been released from prison just 5 months earlier after serving time on drug trafficking charges. To many investigators, his name already carried weight. His history was well documented: violence, obsession, abuse, confessions that never quite led to charges. Witnesses from the party described Yost as heavily intoxicated, agitated, snappy. His behavior stood out even among others who had been drinking. When police tracked him down, they noticed something else immediately. Yost's face and hands were burned. He claimed the injuries came from an accident involving a burn barrel. According to him, aerosol cans inside the barrel had exploded. It was a convenient explanation, one that did not involve Jessica. But the story began to unravel quickly. Yost's own half-brother came forward with a devastating account. He told police that Yost had admitted to strangling Jessica, that he had dumped her body in the woods, that he had personally watched Yost set her car on fire. Yost was arrested, but once again the charge was not murder, it was arson. No body meant no homicide charge. Search efforts intensified. Volunteers poured into wooded areas across Cass County. Maps were marked. Areas were cleared and rechecked. Week after week, families and strangers walked through fields and forests, hoping to find something, anything. Then in April 2017, nearly 7 months after Jessica vanished, a man searching for mushrooms in a rural wooded area made a discovery that would change everything. He found bones. At first, he was not sure what he was looking at, but something felt wrong. Trusting his instincts, he called authorities. Search teams arrived, and not far from the first discovery, just yards away, they found a second set of remains. The medical examiner quickly identified one set as belonging to Jessica Runions. The other remains told a different story. They had been there far longer. Months later, DNA testing confirmed what Cara Kopetsky's family had lived with for a decade. The second set of remains belonged to Cara. After 10 years of searching, waiting, and hoping, she had finally been found. With the discovery of both girls' remains, the case shifted overnight. What had once been 2 separate disappearances became one intertwined investigation. Prosecutors charged Kyle Yost with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of abandonment of a corpse. For the families, this was the moment they had waited for. But the road to trial would not be quick. The case was delayed repeatedly. Motions, hearings, scheduling conflicts. Then the COVID pandemic brought everything to a near standstill. Years passed while families waited once again. Finally, in 2021, it was decided that both murders would be tried together. In a move that shocked many observers, Just chose to testify in his own defense. He acknowledged that both Cara and Jessica were last seen with him. That fact was not in dispute, but he denied killing either of them. Instead, he placed the blame on his half-brother, who by then had died by suicide and could not defend himself. Prosecutors dismantled his story piece by piece. They reminded the jury of Just's long history of violence and abuse, of restraining orders, of admitted kidnappings, of escalating behavior that had gone unchecked for years. They presented evidence of at least 7 separate confessions, some made to girlfriends, some to friends, some to fellow inmates, one recorded on an FBI wiretap, another during a jailhouse call to his own mother. Again and again, Just had told people he had killed Cara. The prosecution described a clear pattern: obsession, control, jealousy, rage, triggered by rejection. Cara tried to leave, Jessica moved on with her life. And in both cases, the same response followed: if I cannot have her, nobody can. Without a clear medical cause of death for Cara, securing a first-degree murder conviction was always going to be difficult. The jury deliberated carefully. When the verdict was read, the courtroom was silent. Voluntary manslaughter for Cara Kopetsky, second-degree murder for Jessica Runions. For many, it felt like justice fell short, but the judge imposed the maximum possible sentence: 45 years in prison. For the families, it was not the outcome they had dreamed of, but it was accountability. It was the end of uncertainty. It was knowing that the man responsible would never walk free again. Cara and Jessica were no longer missing. They were no longer reduced to flyers on telephone poles or unanswered questions. Their mothers, Rhonda and Jamie, formed a bond forged through unimaginable loss. They became each other's support system, each other's voice, each other's reminder that persistence matters. This case is not only about one man who committed horrific acts, it is about warning signs that were visible long before lives were lost, about restraining orders that could not protect, about repeated arrests followed by releases, about a system that failed to intervene until it was far too late. And above all, it is about 2 young women whose futures were stolen, if not for relentless searching, if not for communities that refused to forget, if not for one stranger walking through the woods. They might still be missing today,